I've had the privilege of speaking to 400 MSPs. The problems are almost universal. The underlying tools are always a problem.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Extended interview.
Hi, I'm Ben Spector, Product Manager at Zomentum.
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast this week. So you and I first got talking when I did a big webinar for Zomentum a couple of months ago. That was an awesome webinar, wasn't it? That was great fun doing that. And thank you very much for asking me to come onto that, yourself and Shannon. I wanted to get you onto my podcast because you are a fascinating guy with lots of things to talk about regarding sales and marketing for MSPs. Before we get into that and specifically looking at how MSPs should be doing sales and marketing in 2022. Just give us a little bit of your background. So who are you? Where do you come from? What gives you the credibility to talk about sales and marketing?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. Always a very flattering intro. I would guess I'd caveat the whole thing by saying I'm definitely not a sales and marketing expert. What I do know a lot about is mapping the processes that the MSPs learn from the great sales marketing coaches like yourself into the actual tools and platforms that they're using to run their business. So, my background, I was running an MSP for about the last 15 years that I was fortunate enough to sell and exit around October 2020, so just over a year and a half ago. And I was running that business on Autotask as PSA for about 10 years. We had HubSpot for marketing automation for about the last 4 or so years. And we also had a sales, not a sales tool, a quoting tool, QuoteWorks for the last, for actually probably about 7 or 8 years. And after I left that business, I then went to join another MSP as technical director. Because I thought that's where my interests really aligned. I thought what I enjoyed from my MSP was actually doing kind of managing the technical projects and being responsible for overall technical delivery. So I thought, great, tech director, that's exactly what I'm looking for. In reality, though, they were also running their business on Autotask. And it was really interesting for me to discover that actually what I was really enjoying doing, what I ended up spending most of my time doing, was improving their internal sort of platforms and tooling, tuning Autotask to drive as much automation as possible. And it reached a point after a month or so that I was working with their sales team, putting together, sort of helping them put together the technical elements of some proposals. And they were still doing all of their quoting and proposals directly out of Autotask and Microsoft Word. And it was all very manual and a bit painful. So I said to the CEO, look, we really need to deploy QuoteWorks here because it will completely transform the way they're doing their sales. And the CEO said, look, that's all well and good. I understand you've got this QuoteWorks experience, but I've heard about this other platform that's been making a lot of noise in the online communities like the Tech Tribe, and it's called Zomentum. To which my response was kind of flippantly, I've never heard of it. QuoteWorks have been doing this for over 20 years. Who is Zomentum? I'm just really not interested in learning a new platform right now. We've got enough on our hands. And so I was given a bit of a, back in your box, Ben, let's just at least have a demo of Zomentum and see what it's all about. And so I reluctantly had a demo, I guess, as a prospective customer in about January last year, and had that real light bulb sort of fall off chair moment of, wow, this is in fact the entire end-to-end solution to the whole sales problem that I had as an MSP, that they were having as an MSP, and that pretty much any other MSP I'd ever spoken to was also having. They've got a tool that helps them with the marketing, perhaps something like HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, Infusionsoft, those kind of tools. And everyone's generally got a PSA, which does a great job of managing their clients. But there's a gap between marketing and the management of those clients, which is that sales puzzle. And it's And I think so. What I saw in Zomentum was this tool that would sit between HubSpot for me and Autotask and manage the sales pipeline. And
Yeah, yeah.
I'd looked at various platforms over the years and tried to solve it with QuoteWorks and various other bits and pieces, and just had never quite got there.
So I think what we'll do, we'll talk specifically about Zomentum later on in the interview. I know that right now 1,000 MSPs across the world are putting their head in their hands saying, oh my God, I need another piece of software to add to my stack. First, they told me I needed a PSA, then I needed an RMM, then I needed a piece of marketing software. Now, a year ago it was customer experience platforms, and now I need a sales one. But no, I think having seen myself just a little bit of what Zomentum does, I think you're right that it's identified a hole, a problem, and we'll come back specifically to what Zomentum does later on. Now, you when you had your MSP, which you said you were running for 15 years, it's very interesting that you had the same problems that you then saw in the MSP that you went to work with. And I know that obviously since you sold that business, was it a year and a half ago, you've gone on and you've worked with a number of MSPs. Obviously, you working with them through Zomentum and through your own sort of coaching and mentoring that you do. Do you see that all MSPs have this issue of this sort of problem with marketing and sales, or is it would you say that's everyone that's got that issue?
Yeah. So as you say, I've now had the I don't know if privilege is the right word, but I'll use it anyway. I've had the privilege of speaking to 200, 300, 400 MSPs over the last year or so, and the problems are almost universal. And the MSPs themselves are at different levels of maturity in terms of their sales and marketing processes, but the underlying tools are always a problem. A lot of the more mature ones, perhaps they're working with a sales coach or a business coach. They've got a marketing agency on board, and those professional individuals or firms are delivering everything they need in terms of the knowledge. They're helping them build out the collateral. They're helping them build out the processes at a theoretical level. But none of them have, or very few of them have managed to then implement that knowledge and that material into the actual systems that are going to automate those processes and manage the processes for them.
And that's a real issue, isn't it? Because, as we've talked about 1,000 times on this podcast, it's not just about being good at what you do. It's about being good at marketing that. And actually, the most successful MSPs from a marketing point of view are those that get good at marketing, systemize it, put in place the software, put in place the systems, and they're driving it every day.
Yeah, but it's very difficult. Yeah, I think most MSP owners are technically led. There are very few MSPs I've come across that are led by sales leaders who've then hired technical people to join them. Normally, they're technical leaders that have tried to then find sales leaders to join them. And that's a problem that really resonates for me, because I went through I went through 3 sales directors or sales leaders in the space of about 6 or 7 years. And looking back at it retrospectively, it's quite interesting. I can see exactly what I was doing wrong, because nobody else is ever going to talk about my business as passionately as I would. And therefore, actually the technical leader, that MSP owner, needs to really become their own sales voice. And it's very difficult to do, but with the right tools to help you do that, it becomes a lot easier. I didn't really know anything about how to manage a sales pipeline, what the stages look like, and therefore how to processize it. But with tools like Zomentum, it gives you that framework that you can quite easily build out a process, even if you don't really know what you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we've just acknowledged, most MSPs don't really know what they're doing. What you've said there is what I think the vast majority of MSPs would admit to. So without turning this into a massive plug for Zomentum, which I'm always cautious of, this isn't a commercial podcast, this is an educational podcast, but I do think that Zomentum is a great tool, and it's one that should be explored. Let's just briefly look at what's the gap that the creators of Zomentum saw, and how does Zomentum fill that gap and help make sales easier for an MSP?
The gap really was understanding that most MSPs have the same problem. They don't know how to sell, but the problem really comes from the lack of tooling, more so perhaps than the lack of knowledge, or perhaps you can use a tool to deliver that knowledge and help build out those processes.
So specifically, how does it do that? Again, without obviously getting into the specifics of it, what are the ways that Zomentum fixes that problem?
So I think it probably helps to perhaps take a step back from Zomentum specifically, and the sales piece, and look at the overall process through an MSP's business. And I wouldn't say I've always said this, because it's been something of a realization over the last year. But there's 4 key tools that I think all MSPs need to have. And I would always build this stack backwards now. When you first start a new business, the first thing you need to be able to do is comply with accounting legislation, file your taxes, do your payroll, and issue invoices to clients. You need to be able to collect the money. So the first tool that you're probably going to look at is going to be an accounting tool like QuickBooks or Xero, that's going to help you collect cash at the early days of the business. And that will run you up until maybe you've got 5 or 10 clients, where you can keep that information mostly self-contained in your head. You're probably not needing to share it with many other people. But when you reach that tipping point, the next thing you need is the ability to manage those clients. And so that's then where the PSA comes in. So once you get past perhaps that initial 5 or 10 clients, or you're starting to employ more people, you bring on board a PSA to help you with the onboarding, the project planning, the service desk, the billing, which will then integrate with and pass things on to your accounting. That's great. And you're starting to get organic referrals at that point. You're building your client base. You're probably not doing any proactive sales and marketing, but you're building your business very organically. People are referring prospects to you. So then there comes a point where, with those referrals, you need a way to track all of the incoming organic opportunities. And so then I think is the time to look at bringing in a sales platform like Zomentum to help you manage the sales cycle and ensure that of those organically arriving at referrals and prospects, you're closing as many of them as possible. Then there comes a point where you're closing the vast majority of the incoming organic referrals, and you're ready to start proactively marketing to bring in the less organic opportunities. And so that, I think, is the time when you really want to start looking at bringing on board marketing resources, reaching out to the marketing firm, putting in place the marketing automations tools like HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, that kind of thing. So when I talk about that core pipeline through the business, building it backwards from the accounting, then to the PSA, then to the sales, and then finally to the marketing.
Ben, you've just laid out the first 5 to 10 years of an MSP's life there. it's
I wish it was that easy.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to do a few technical things and, take a few phone calls along the way. But yeah, there's certainly something in that. Listen, you and I are going to continue our conversation on YouTube, but we're going to pause for now on the podcast. Just tell us a little bit more about how we can get in touch with you and talk about Zomentum.
Sure. Best place is probably to look me up on LinkedIn. Just search Ben Spector. If you want to know more about Zomentum, it's just Zomentum.com.
So in your MSP, you had HubSpot. What was it that made you choose HubSpot in the first place? And would you use HubSpot again if you were doing it all over again?
Two very good questions, and I think the answer is probably quite interesting to both of them. So HubSpot, in a way, I think are the pioneers of the inbound marketing concept, or if not the pioneers, they've certainly been the biggest advocate for it over the last few years. And we found as a business, whenever I was sitting down with my sales director to look for some kind of marketing advice or to answer a marketing question, invariably the Google search landed on a HubSpot knowledge base article or some kind of educational piece put out by HubSpot. And I think that's a fantastic testament to the power of inbound marketing. If we were consistently day in, day out landing on HubSpot's educational pieces, whatever we were searching for whatever we wanted to know about marketing, we landed on HubSpot. So as a result, it became the obvious choice was to then, use the platform that was consistently delivering the answers we were looking for. You're right, it's very expensive, or it can be very expensive. But I think one of the other reasons I really admire HubSpot is that they've absolutely nailed the good, better, best packaging model for their pricing. I think most people looking at HubSpot will have a look at the starter plan, which is about £50 a month. It's really not expensive, and it will probably do you well for a few months. But pretty quickly, you'll realize there's this one little automation feature that you desperately, desperately want, and it's only available in the Pro plan. So suddenly your HubSpot bill goes up from £50 a month to about £600 a month. So you're talking quite big jumps. And then again, once you're on the professional plan, we never went beyond professional because, frankly, by the time you're looking at enterprise, you're talking about I think Zomentum uses HubSpot, and our bill for enterprise is about $14,000 a month. It can get seriously expensive a month. Yes, it can get very expensive very quickly.
Hang on. For $14,000 a month, I want the CEO of HubSpot to come and wash my car on a Sunday morning.
You would think, but once you're operating an enterprise at that kind of scale, the HubSpot know what reporting caveats to build into the plan so that as soon as you're managing sales teams of a certain size, you simply can't do it without the advanced reporting that the enterprise plan brings in. So I guess the conclusion there, HubSpot, they've nailed the inbound marketing, and the way the platform helps you build out inbound marketing is fantastic. And we saw quite a lot of success from that, and a lot of admiration for the way they've really nailed upselling and cross-selling within their platform as well. To the question of would I make the same decision again? Definitely. And outside of Zomentum, I do various bits of consulting and mentoring, sort of coaching work. And quite often one of the conclusions of that is that the business in question needs some kind of marketing CRM. And generally, probably because I know it the best, HubSpot becomes quite a natural choice for that.
Yeah, HubSpot's an interesting one. I've been watching it for a number of years, and I think I would be using HubSpot, but for the fact I am wholly integrated with something called Keep, K-E-A-P, which used to be called Infusionsoft, and I've actually used Infusionsoft. It was Infusionsoft was HubSpot before HubSpot, but HubSpot is definitely better. It has better functionality. I think they had a more focused development plan. Infusionsoft took the money from the bank, took the VC money, and went off down the wrong path. And there are just things that Infusionsoft can't do that HubSpot can do, which is quite frustrating sometimes. Interestingly, you mentioned about HubSpot, it's inbound marketing. So you Google virtually anything to do with marketing, and you're right, you end up on HubSpot's Knowledge Center. And actually, if you read the book They Ask, You Answer by Marcus Sheridan, and he uses HubSpot, what he describes in that book is exactly the marketing that HubSpot do. And have you read the book, Ben?
No, I haven't, but I definitely need to from what you're saying.
You will lap it up. It's on Audible as well. And Marcus Sheridan, the author, who now runs a marketing company, and they're HubSpot partners, unsurprisingly. He used to run a swimming pool company in the US and basically saved the entire company by inventing or stumbling across inbound marketing. And so, the swimming pools they were selling at the time, they were a difficult sell because they were very complicated products. And so he put together hundreds of articles and videos explaining swimming pools. And so very quickly they became, they had an enormous amount of inbound traffic. And then they found HubSpot and started using HubSpot to start tracking people. And he describes in the book going out, I think it's his last ever sales call he did as the sales rep before he became just one of the owners. And he went to visit this couple, and he knew from their HubSpot record that they'd read 600 different pages of the website, and he could see which those pages were, how many hours they'd been on the website, how many return visits. And as you can imagine, he got there and they told him what they wanted. So it was completely the opposite of 3 or 4 years earlier, where he was trying to help people build their pool and option it all together. This elderly couple told him exactly what they wanted in that pool. He was literally an order taker. And they transformed that swimming pool, sort of a small regional swimming pool installation company, is now a fairly large manufacturer swimming pool company, which is an amazing book. And all of that was done through HubSpot. So it is a great piece of software. There is a book, another book, which I can recommend, and it's about HubSpot of about 10 years ago. It's called Disrupted, and it was written by a guy who was a journalist who was hired by HubSpot to go and work at their content creation department. And he actually tells a story of utter chaos. It was a classic VC-funded, certainly in the early days, it was a VC-funded piece of software that was, that was utterly chaotic. They were switching business model every day. It's a great read, and I don't think it reflects very well on the HubSpot of today. HubSpot has moved on from then, but it's certainly it's an amusing read to read how something of substance today started out back in the day. So let's pick up about what it must have been like for you to go back to being an employee. So when did you say that you started your MSP? When did you first become a business owner?
That's actually a really difficult one to answer. It was somewhere between 2008 and 2011-ish.
Okay.
And I say that because I think a journey that probably resonates for a lot of MSP owners is I didn't start doing it planning to start a business. It started off as me doing some IT consulting, sort of straight out of university. The IT consulting, the reality of consulting on a project is that there's an inevitable support requirement afterwards. And those support requirements trickle on and on and on and never really go away. So then I was finding that really distracting. I was just finding that really distracting, trying to work on the high ticket project with this constant dribble increasing support requests. So I ended up hiring somebody to handle that support while I was doing the consulting. And then over the years that followed, it kind of gradually pivoted into the managed services model that everyone's familiar with today. Anyway, a bit of a digression.
That's okay. So, but it's fair to say you've been your own boss for 20 years or so. And I've been my own boss 20 years or so. No, so 10, 15 years or so. I've been my own boss since 2005, and I would consider myself to be unemployable now. And in fact, when I sold my first business in 2016, I had 3 offers and a higher offer. So it was one with more money. I would have had to have gone and worked for someone, and that was one of the reasons why I turned that down, because I actually went for a lower cash offer, but it meant I didn't have to work for that person. So what was it like for you when you sold your MSP because you told us earlier that you went to join another MSP as the technical director? That must have just played with your mind a little bit.
Unemployable is an interesting word, and it's one that I've repeated over and over again for many years as well. Because I figured, having gone straight from university, which coincidentally I dropped out of, I didn't even finish my degree, going straight from that to working pretty much sort of self-employed, I didn't have any CV, I didn't have any verified credentials. So I used that word quite a lot to describe my own abilities. I'm unemployable. I've got nothing behind me, no work history, no CV, no nothing. So what would actually come after running my own business? And I figured, well, if I'm unemployable, even if the business isn't doing as well as I would like it to be, it's my only option. And I wonder if there are probably quite a few MSP owners that perhaps have started the business because they feel unemployable, but they know they're good at IT. and are perhaps dragging on because they're not really sure what comes next. Anyway, moving on from that to look at what's it like working for someone else. The biggest stress I found in my business, and I think it comes from being so emotionally attached to your own business, was customer complaint or customer not wanting to pay an invoice for any reason. And I make it sound like that was a regular occurrence. It wasn't. But I felt like as the business leader, all that I was ever really dealing with was the escalated complaints. And it became quite demoralizing, frankly. Even just one complaint a month, if that's kind of what's starting to take up an unnecessary amount of your time, it just becomes quite demoralizing. And I found that really stressful. What I like about being employed, and a difficult one, I'm not directly employed, I'm still sort of contracting, which I think is a really good middle ground, is you don't have to worry about a lot of those things. You don't really have to worry about the financial health of the business so much. You don't really need to worry about which customer's not going to pay their invoice or where's the next pound or dollar coming from, because those, obviously I'm not a sales or marketing leader within Zomentum. And so where those next dollars are coming from isn't really directly my responsibility. Obviously it concerns everyone, but I don't have to be stressed about where the money's coming from. And I don't know why I put so much emphasis on that, but I think over years of being self-employed, that became such a point of stress. And so having the opportunity to work in a really focused way on the things that I actually enjoy without having any distraction from the things that I really don't enjoy. So I can now spend all of my time solving problems, which I love doing, and spend none of my time worrying about money and complaints. And so I think to anyone that's questioning, well, what's it like working for someone else? I think it depends. And it depends where you're working or who you're working for. If you're working in a great organization with a great culture that's built to empower people to do what they're best at and what they enjoy doing, I think that I've found a lot of peace actually in having that more employed relationship.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And I think the worry, so I know that worry. I used to have it when I had a marketing agency, and I would wake up in the morning worrying about an angry client or a frustrated client, or is that guy going to pay his bill? And I get that, and I think it's a symptom of caring. I think when you stop caring, you stop thinking that way, and these things just become frustrating problems. But it hurts us here because we care, because it's our name above the door. And that's one of the big downsides of being a business owner. But I do think you reach a point where you have to mature yourself out of that. Otherwise, you end up 6 feet under before you've actually done your 30, 40 years of being a business owner. Okay. Final question for you, Ben, and then we'll wrap up here. And I want to talk about shiny new thing syndrome. I have some peer groups that I run. So we have our service, the MSP Marketing Edge, and we have some Zoom-based peer groups and an in-person peer group, which meets once every month in the wonderful city of Milton Keynes here in the UK. Which is where I live. And we have a kind of a long-standing joke in that in-person peer group, which is the answer is never switching to another PSA. Because quite often, you have cyclical things where someone in the group will say, "Oh, I'm going. Do you use ConnectWise?" "Yeah, I do." "Oh, I use Autotask," and they'll have a conversation, or they'll throw in, "Oh, I've just moved to Synchro," and you can see everyone's eyes lighting up at the thought of switching to another PSA. And I'm like, right, come on, everyone, remember the answer is never switching to another PSA. It's shiny new thing syndrome. And we at the beginning of this interview, when we were on the podcast, we were talking about things like you switch from QuoteWorks over to Zomentum, and we were talking about HubSpot. What is it about MSPs that sort of makes this shiny new thing syndrome such a thing?
I honestly don't know. And I think, I don't know whether to call it shiny new things or grass is always greener, because shiny new things implies that what you have is already shiny and what you're switching to appears shinier. Whereas I think, to me, grass is greener it puts a slightly more negative slant on what you currently have. If you're dissatisfied with what you currently have, then something else might appear to be more appealing. Personally, for me, the idea of ever switching PSA and going through that traumatic experience, I can't even imagine. When I hear people talking about moving from one PSA to another, I feel like we backed the right horse 10 plus years ago with Autotask, and it served us very well. But the idea, if someone had said, ConnectWise were ringing us every 2 months, frankly, saying, "Oh, are you ready to switch yet?" And just the idea of moving, I'd rather go through some kind of brain surgery, frankly, than, because it's brain surgery for your business, and so much can go wrong. So yeah, when people are talking about moving PSAs, I'd really advise them to look deeply at whether what you currently have is actually meeting your requirements, more so than does the new one look shiny.
Yes, I completely agree. I love that. Switching that should be a quote for this interview. Switching PSA is like having brain surgery for your business. I love that. It's such a great quote. Ben, you've been utterly generous with your time. Thank you so much. You've been so much fun to talk to, and I've enjoyed sort of the calls that we've had leading up to this interview as well. Just remind us how we can get in touch with you.
A couple of places. If it's Zomentum related, you can email me, ben@zomentum.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about the kind of platforms, mentoring, tactical support, I call it, you can email me, ben@benspector.uk, or look up website, benspector.uk. Always happy to chat about those things.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Extended interview.